when you see Jesus speaking and who Jesus is speaking to. This narrative in Matthew chapter 8 is at an interesting time after Jesus had been ministering. Jesus had been healing the sick. He had been giving sight to the blind. He had been healing the lame. And so Jesus is tired from all of these activities of the day. If you look at chapter 8, you'll discover all that Jesus was doing. Chapter 8 begins in Matthew by saying he had cleansed a leper. And then it also discusses the faith of a centurion soldier who needed Jesus to intervene on his behalf. And if you get around chapter 18, Jesus starts speaking to his disciples. He says something profound to them. He says, foxes have holes and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his own head. Jesus was speaking to them and he was ministering to them. He was ministering to others. And now Jesus is tired and he tells them to get into a boat. He gets in with them and they attempt to cross over to the other side. And the Bible teaches us in this particular narrative that while they were on that sea, a storm came. And in that storm, they thought that they were going to die. But in this particular text, we see Jesus having a conversation with his disciples about their storm. And I need to really be able to tell you, my brothers and sisters, that Jesus Christ will speak to your storms. Amen. And I love this particular narrative because in this narrative, there are some examples of what we need to do when storms and the storms of life come into our lives. And I can assure you that storms are going to come in your life. Amen. Some storms are going to come expected and some are going to be unexpected. Some you're going to be prepared for, and others you're not going to be prepared for. But if you look at these disciples in this storm with Jesus, you're going to see how to survive storms. I really want you to look at the action of the disciples. I want you to look at the actions of Jesus. And these two actions of the disciples, the actions of Jesus, is going to really give us a good roadmap of what to do in the middle of a storm. And I want to give you about 5 or 6 lessons that you can learn from this particular narrative, because what Jesus does in this narrative that I really love is Jesus speaks to their storm, and he doesn't speak to them first, but what he does in the text, according to the text, he speaks to their storm first, and then he speaks to them. And it looks like there is a rebuke of them from Jesus, but Jesus speaks to their storm because Jesus realized you'll never hear him until he settles the storms in your life. Do I have any witnesses in here? Because sometimes all of the storms that happen in our lives, sometimes they distract us from hearing from Jesus, but they ought to move us to talk to Jesus. I can give them this credit. One thing they did that I tell you ought to do, whenever there's a storm in your life, you need to find Jesus. Whenever there's a storm in your life, wherever Jesus is, because the text says Jesus was not on the deck of the boat, but he was under the deck of the boat, and he was asleep in the middle of a storm. Yeah. And my brothers and sisters, that is extraordinary that Jesus was asleep in the middle of a storm. And if you would allow your imagination to go with me, let me tell you, we might be disturbed by the storms of life, but Jesus ain't. I mean, the Bible says that the waves, the tempest, the wind, the storm was raging, but Jesus was asleep. In the hull of the ship, he was asleep. He was not disturbed. And let me tell you, my brothers and sisters, if I had time, I could tell you a little bit about Jesus. He wasn't afraid of the storm. The storm didn't bother him, because let me tell you, you can't disturb he who is peace in the middle of a storm. Not only did he bring peace, but he is peace. And peace could not be disturbed even in a storm. And so Jesus was asleep in the hull of this boat. And I can tell you the extraordinary thing that one commentator wanted me to tell you, that these were not just ordinary men, but these were extraordinary men in the fact that what they did for a living is they lived on a boat. They made their living in boats. And these were expert navigation men. They were expert in sailing boats. They were expert in literally handling storms. This is not the first storm that they encountered, but one commentator wanted me to tell you that this was a ferocious storm, and from Mount Hermon the winds came down. The cool winds from the snow-capped mountains of Mount Hermon rushed down the mountain, and when you came down the mountain, they came through this small valley, and as they came through this small valley, they whisked around, and the closer they got to the sea, the more furious they got. And when they got to the Sea of Galilee, the Bible says that they caused a great tempest, and the wave of this sea was about 25 foot tall, and the disciples could not navigate through this storm. And I can tell you, my brothers and sisters, sometimes there are going to be some storms you just can't handle. You might have handled some other storms in your life. You might have handled some other situations in this life. Even these expert fishermen couldn't handle this storm, because sometimes there are going to be some things that just happen in your life that's going to be tougher than other things that happen in your life. These expert fishermen, other storms, they survived. But this storm, they tried to do everything that they did when they went through other storms, but nothing happened, nothing worked this time. They tried, and the Bible says in other versions of this same story, they toiled, they tried their best to stabilize the ship, to survive, to make it over to the other side. But this time, they just could not make it. And somebody, they didn't give a name, who it was, but somebody said, we got to go wake Jesus up. Because we ain't going to get this one under control. We're not going to be able to handle this one. We're not going to get ourselves out of this one. And I need to tell you, there's just some situations that if the Lord don't get you out of it, you ain't going to get out of it. And I know I got some witnesses in here, because there's some stuff in your life you've gotten out of it by praying. You've gotten out of it by being patient. You've gotten out of it just by having fortitude and energy and faith. But then there's something that just happened in your life. If Jesus don't help you, you ain't going to be able to stand the storm. Do I have any witnesses in here? If the Lord don't help you, you're not going to be able to survive the storm. And the disciples realized that if we don't get Jesus involved in this storm, we're not going to make it. Others, we've been able to make it through the storms. Other times, we've been able to survive the storms. Other times, we've been able to navigate ourselves out of the storm. But this storm, we got to get Jesus involved. And let me tell you, the thing that they really knew about Jesus, they knew what Jesus had done. And they had already seen Jesus do some extraordinary things that defy logic, that defy reason, that goes against all human expectations. Let me tell you, when you can give sight to the blind, when you can heal the lame, and when you can touch dead people and they come back to life, let me tell you, calm in a storm ain't a big deal. And the disciples knew that Jesus could handle this problem and this storm, and so they went down and woke Jesus up. And they started talking to him. And I can tell you, my brothers and sisters, storms will make you talk to him. Listen, if a storm can't make you talk to him, I don't know what can. Because just a little talk with Jesus will make everything all right. Tell him all about your problem. He will hear your faintest cry, and he will answer by it. Just talk to him sometime. In the midst of your soul. Jesus sleep. And they went down and they woke him up. And verse 25 says, they said to him, save us. save us. And I can just stop right there. And Josh is going to Belhaven College. He was telling me he's taking a hermeneutics class, so I'm going to give you an example of hermeneutics. This idea of save us. They spoke in the immediate present, and they were in perils, and they were in a crisis, and they knew that the only thing that could save them was him. And so they said, save us. We are all in danger of perishing. And that's in the immediate present. The hermeneutics is they did not try to pray a long prayer. They did not say the father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They got straight to the point. They said, save us. They didn't try to give a lot of formalities. They said, save us. And the reason why they said save us, because they knew they were immediately and presently in danger of dying. And if the Lord didn't help them, they wasn't going to be able to stand. Save us. And then one translation says, and they asked him, do you care? He said, I don't think you could ever ask the Lord, do he? He always cares. And even if you don't think he cares, and even when you don't think he cares, he always cares. And this translation says, for we are perishing. And my brothers and sisters, you got to know there are times in your life that if the Lord don't get you out of there, you ain't getting Well, I tell you, if I had time, I'd preach in here. You got to know that if the Lord don't get you out of certain stuff, you ain't going to get out. And I got 2 or 3 witnesses that can testify. You can look back over your life, and if the truth be told, there were some times in your life you've been in some storms, been in some trouble, and if the Lord hadn't got you out, you're standing here today, you're sitting here today because the Lord came just in time, on time, and got you out of a perilous situation, right? Right on time. He said, we are perishing. And I tell you, he'll come get you right on time and in time. And one commentator, Steen, wanted me to tell you this. The interesting thing about it is they didn't know about the storm ahead, but he did. And sometimes he'll send you in a storm to get you out of a storm and get you through a storm. And see, Jesus knew that the storm was coming, they did. When he sent them anyway, he knew that the cool air from the top of Mount Hermon, which was about 9,000 feet high, was going to come down and meet the warm winds of the sea and cause a storm, and he sent them anyway. And I need to tell you somebody, listen, he'll send you in a storm to get you through a storm, to eventually get you out of a storm. And so I'm just trying to tell you, don't worry about going in storm. He will get you through. When the storms of life are raging, he will stand by. He knows storms coming. And you remember other times, Sister Hannah, he sent them across, but he stayed up in a high mountain to pray. But this time he knew they were going to need him, so he went with them and got beneath the deck of the boat. And because Jesus knew the storm was coming, and he knew they would call on him. And I need to tell you, my brothers and sisters, storms will come. And sometimes he'll send you right into a storm, but he won't send you by yourself. Some of y'all know because you've been in some. Some of y'all living on the other side of storms. And do I have any witnesses? He got you through the storm. When you didn't think you were going to make it, he came and he saved you. Right on time. You were right on the verge of destruction, right in the middle of a storm, and you had hope. You called on him, and right on time. He showed up. And then verse 26, and he said to them, and I really want to close with this because he said to them some simple stuff. Some real good stuff too, but simple, but it was some good stuff. He asked them, and I'm going to give a little commentary and a little hermeneutical exegesis of this. He said to them, why are you afraid? Now listen, that's a question. It's really a rhetorical question because he knew why they were afraid, but that's a pretty good question to ask at this moment because they had already seen what he can do. And he had protected them and kept them safe up until this point. But I can tell you, my brothers and sisters, there will come a time, no matter how much you love Jesus and serve Jesus and how long you've been walking with him, there will come a time when fear will set in. I don't care how saved you are, there comes a time in your life as a Christian there will be moments of uncertainty, times of uncertainty, when fear sets in, and Jesus asked them, why are you afraid? And sometimes we get afraid because of the uncertainties of life. Sometimes we get afraid because of the unexpected things in life. Sometimes we get afraid because life becomes overwhelming. Fear sets in. We become afraid because it's uncertain to us. The future is unknown to us. And the immediate present, we just don't think we are going to make it. Really what I love about this particular text is it speaks to the human nature of human beings, and that is you shouldn't try to be butch too spiritual because you're still human. Now don't think I'm up here because I'm trying to be superhuman. I'm up here because this is what God called me to do, and I've got to do it in spite of and because of, and it's not that I'm spiritually superhuman. I'm still human. I love what I do. I love the Lord. But listen, there comes a time in your life, Lamar, you got to take your faith off the shelf and live it. You can't talk about God being good, God blessing, God providing, God being with you. Sometimes you got to live it. Sometimes you got to walk the faith you proclaim. A whole lot of people talk about Jesus, but they don't ever walk it with him and for him in difficult times. Easy for me to stay at home this morning, but this is a difficult time. I got to take my faith off the shelf and live it. These are the times when faith is submitted, faith is demonstrated, faith is an example to others. Even though you're in storm, still serve the Lord. I promised him that I would serve him until I. Why are you afraid? And then Jesus says something. You men of little faith. I tell you, I'm going to really talk to this idea. You men of little faith, because it really wasn't a little faith. And Jesus, the language that's in the text, Josh, is language you really got to decipher and understand what he wasn't saying. He was really saying that their faith was being challenged and tested, and they were failing. It's not that they didn't have faith, but they were failing in this moment. Because he was really trying to get them to put all the pieces together. Now, you saw what I've done for others. Now, I chose you, I picked you, and he hadn't even got to the great high priestly prayer in John chapter 17, where he says, all that you gave me, I've kept. Now, let me tell you, he said, get into the boat and let's cross over to the other side. Now, you got to understand, he already said what was going to happen, and this was a temporary disruption, and he said, let us cross over to the other side. And he really saying to them, do you think I'm going to let you perish out here in the middle of this sea when I told you that we are going across to the other side? You got to understand, he was not finished with his work. He was not finished with them. And let me tell you, my brothers and sisters, until the Lord finishes with you, with all that he's assigned your hands to do, you still gonna be here. No matter what storms come in your life, you are not going to perish. He said you're failing, your faith is failing the test. When we started out on this journey, I told you, let us cross over to the other side. Now, what God said is exactly what God meant. And I would even suggest, according to the argument of the text and most scholars, even if Jesus wouldn't have came up and rebuked the wind, they'd have made it over to the other side, because that's what he said was going to happen. Let's cross over to the other side. Nothing is going to happen to you until you get where he said you were going to. Some of y'all ought to shout. Because you having some things happening in your life, it look like it ought to take you out, it should take you out, but he got a place for you to be, work for you to do, things for you to do, and you gonna make it no matter. Tell you, I heard one commentator say this, and he talked about his own life experience, and he said, I got too much work to do to die. He was going through a personal battle and personal struggle, and everybody was talking about, listen, you afraid? And this has killed most people. And he says, I got too much work to do for God to die. And I tell you, somebody ought to shout right now. Because there's some stuff, some diagnosis, some things that have happened. You've been in some situations. It looked like it should have took you out. But listen, you got too much work. He has applied too much work for your hands to do. Whatever you've been through ain't going to take you out. He ordered them to go on the sea. He knew about the storm. And he says to them, O ye of little faith, you're failing this test. And boy, he kept them safe up until this point. Well, I tell you, every time I think about that old Negro hymn that we sing, it's also sung by the white church. It says, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Blind, but now I see. The part I really wanted to make you shout, through many dangers, toils. Through many dangers, toils. Through many dangers, I'm stuck right there. Through many dangers, toils. And snap out all. Radical was grace that brought me thus far. And grace will lead me. Some say home, but I say on. It was a failure of their faith in the time of testing. It was a failure of their faith in the time of a storm. It was a failure of their faith, a testing of their faith. It was pressure put on their faith. And so Jesus says, O ye of little faith. And then when Jesus got through rebuking and dealing with them, and then Jesus got to the good stuff. Because he had to settle them. And then he had to get up and do the big stuff. This is the conversation he started having with the storm. And the Bible says he got up. And boy, see, y'all got to know when to shout. Whenever you can get Jesus to get up on your behalf. And I tell you, he'll get up. The old church used to say, call him up and tell him what you want. It can be late in the evening, early. Just call him up. Just a little talk with Jesus. Tell him all about your problems. He will hear your faintest cry. And he will answer. They called on him. And he got up. And I tell you, he'll get up for you if you'll just call on him this morning. Call on him in your despair. Call on him in your storm. Call on him in your trouble. He'll get up. He will. Get up. He got up. And the next phrase of this particular text, Josh, is where the miracle takes place. Because he got up. Now you got to understand what he did. He rebuked the wind. Boy, I have in Dubai a couple of months ago. You know, Dubai is a desert. Dubai is now one of the greatest economic cities in the world. And they decided they wanted to make it rain. And so they put these electro crystals in the air. And when they saw a thundercloud coming, and this hydroelectrical charge caused it to just rain. But what they realized is that they could make it rain, but they couldn't stop it from. And it flooded the whole city of. See, that's one thing, to manipulate the weather. It's one thing to manipulate the wind, the storm, but it's another thing when you can control it. When you tell the wind to blow, it blows. But when you tell it to stop, the text says he rebuked. I tell you. And one commentator says that, listen, if nature is a woman, and we call it Mother Nature, for the first time, Jesus told a woman to quit. And she quit. Stop doing all that you're doing, stirring up a fuss. And he literally rebuked Mother Nature and says, peace. Let me give you this, and I got to close, because he really, now this is really a dramatic play on the text. Dr. Christopher Davis at Memphis Theological Seminary said you got to have imagination in preaching. So this is the dramatic tension of the text. Wind itself ain't dangerous, because wind is the good thing, because wind brings storms, and storms bring rain, snow, and that's how we get the seasons. But what Jesus did, he took the danger out of the wind. Well, I wish y'all got to know when to listen to the text. Wind itself ain't dangerous, but let me tell you, he took the danger from the wind. He rebuked the wind. And then let me tell you, that was atmospheric. Yeah, that's the weather, that's the wind. I told you, Mount Hermon, 9,000 feet. The ice-capped mountains of Mount Hermon, the cool wind would come down the mountain. It would come at an accelerated speed, and it would meet the warm winds down in the valley. And as it met the warm winds, it would start turning, and it would just start blowing at a rapid speed. And then that atmospheric pressure caused there to be a storm under the sea, because it was the mixture of warm and cold waters. And so not only were there atmospheric disruptions in the atmosphere, there were cosmic, because the tide and all of the undersea currents got disturbed and the waves started. Not only did he speak to the wind, but he spoke to the sea. And listen, he rebuked the sea. He took the danger out of the water, even though they was on the water and in the water, so that they could keep on sailing. And let me tell you, my brothers and sisters, I sure feel like preaching. He'll take the danger out of some stuff that is dangerous to keep you safe. Trouble in my way. I have to cry sometimes. I lay awake at night, but that's all right. Jesus, he will fix it. Trouble in my way. I have to cry sometimes. And sometimes I lay awake at night. But I have to say to my soul, that's all right. I know Jesus, he will fix it. After a while. So he rebuked both the wind and the sea. And I got to give you this last thing, because this is the shouting part of the passage. And one thing they're going to teach you in hermeneutics is when you preach, always preach in the right lane, because that's where the exits are. So this last verse is the exit. And so I'm about to pull off the highway. So I'm going to slow down, because I'm going to exit off. And look what the text says. The text says, and it became perfect. Boy, I tell you, come. Now, do I have any witnesses in here that the Lord will come and has calmed some things down in your... You was in it, and it looked like it was going to take you out. And situations that you felt like giving up in, the Lord done calmed them. Some of y'all know it's a job you work on. It's the people you work with. It's the families you're a part of. It is a financial situation. And he calmed it now. Perfect. And it became perfectly. And I don't have time to give any word study on the word perfectly. Same sea, same boat. Wind has become calm. The seas have become calm. And they can now continue their journey across to the other. They make it. You gonna make it. Al, you gonna make it. No matter what, you're in, what's ahead of you, you gonna make it. It don't look like it at first, but you gonna. Some of y'all been where I am right now. You ain't gonna make me cry, but I'm gonna tell you, y'all been where I am, and you still here after, and you made it, and you didn't think you were gonna make it. Life was tough. You felt like giving up, throwing in the towel. You thought life was over, but you are still. You made it over. To the other side of losing somebody you love. You on the other side of it. Because he brought peace. And I got to give some context and give another bit of imagination to the text, Josh. It's not only does God bring peace to the situation and the circumstance, the wind and the sea, but I shout about that. But the peace I need him to really give is in me. The peace that abides in me. When the storm of life are raging, stand by me. When the storms of life are raging, won't he stand by you? And not only did he bring peace to the situation, but he brought peace in their hearts. You want to know how I'm standing here? Because to Mama, he brought her peace. And then I've been talking to him all week long, praying. And when he brought her peace, he gave me peace. Peace. To accept the things that I cannot change. Give me the courage to change the things that I can. And the wisdom to know the difference. And then the text closes by saying, and the men were amazed. And boy, let me tell you, if I was an old preacher, I could really preach. And if it wasn't the circumstances given, I could really preach verse 27, because it says, the men were amazed, and they said, what kind of man is this? Well, boy, you got to, well, let me tell you, in preaching, that's how you get off that exit that says, what kind of man is this? And you know, you ain't supposed to be on the exit long. The highway is longer than the exit. And if it wasn't the circumstance I'm in now, I'd gone off this exit, and I talk about what kind of man is this? That can speak to the wind. And the wind obey him. And if I had time, I'd explain to you. He's the same one that was in the beginning, Genesis chapter 1, that said, let us make man. It's the same one that said in Colossians, by him all things consist. And he's the same one in John chapter 1 that says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with him. And he was the Word, and the Word became. Who is this? What kind of man is this? I tell you, the kind of man it is the kind of man that came down through 42 generations. Stopped in Bethlehem. He's the kind of man that went around doing good, healing the sick and raising the dead. What kind of man is this? He's the man that showed up and raised Lazarus from the dead. What kind of man is this? He was the man that they marched from judgment hall to judgment hall. Finally took him and nailed him on a cross on a hill called Calvary. The kind of man is this. This is the man. They put him in a borrowed tomb. But he didn't stay there. Stayed there for 3 long days. But early, Sunday morning, got up, stood up, spoke up, declared that all power, I mean somehow all power in heaven and earth is in my hand. That's what kind of man this is. And let me tell you, I love him, and I've tried it. And I know him for myself. And do I have anybody else in here that can testify? Do you know the man? Ain't he all right? Do you know the man?